FMCC webinar, The Velocity of Workplace Innovation, Smart Buildings, Smart Cities, and Infinite Data, presented by Paul Doherty, AIA. Everyone has been muted for audio quality. And please, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box during the presentation. We will review them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. I do want to let everyone know that the FMCC provides many services to the FM community, such as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and online educational resources. You may find more information at their website, fmcc.ifma.org. And we would also like to thank our sponsors of this webinar. And also, I'd like to let you know at the end of the webinar that you will be asked to take a short survey. I encourage you to take the survey as the FMCC board does look at the feedback. A PDF of the PowerPoint and a recording of the webinar will be available shortly after the webinar. And at this time, I want to go ahead and turn the presentation over to our presenter, Paul Doherty.
Thank you very much, Joshua. The learning objectives for this particular session, which is going to be an interesting one because it's going to ask you to stretch your imagination of where facility management is going. The horizon lines that I'll be discussing are actually going to be tying back to real-world projects that are underway right now, just to give it context. But the idea is that we'll have the opportunity at the end of this session to construct a solution framework to address the holistic opportunities of this whole idea of an interconnected world. Some people are calling it the Internet of Things. There's other companies calling it the Internet of Everything. And try to find out what those best practices are for your organization. The second learning objective, of course, is to identify these technologies and also look for the standards and processes for your organization because, as you know, when technologies come out, sometimes they come and go, but the standards and processes are the things that last. Then, of course, we're going to be trying to understand the effects of this, this new wave of technology and integrating into the bricks and mortar of the physical environment. And what does that do to your work processes and the workplace? You know, there's a big movement right now about placemaking. And what does that really mean at the end of the day? Well, we're going to take a look at placemaking, not in individual building, but as individual cities. And what does that mean? And then finally, we're going to present some tools and services that provide some real practical solutions out there that are available now that can actually have some measure of success. So next slide, please. So with all that being said, here's me. Let me cut right to the chase. I'm an architect and have been practicing technology since the beginning of my career. We have an organization now that I manage after being pretty successful in the startup business over the past 15 years or so. If you've ever used the technology called Revit, Buzzsaw, or Tririga, I was part of those initial teams that were the founding partners to actually make a lot of this stuff work in today's world. This latest venture, though, is probably the most exciting because it integrates technology along with actual design and construction and management of many buildings. We're going to show you some stuff that we've done, that we're doing right now in Saudi Arabia, India, and then I just got off the plane just about 45 minutes ago here in Chicago from China. And what we do is that we design, we build, and we implement smart cities around the world. So that's just a brief bio, and of course we can get into any other questions towards the Q&A. But next slide, please. So we have some very interesting geographic locations, and this is the important part of this slide. You'll see in the lower right-hand corner me meeting with Party Secretary from Guangdong Province, Hu, who's the incoming president of China. That was from last Tuesday. What's happening is that we are now seeing politicians, both from the Chinese leadership through Obama's administration, that are taking a really focused look on smart buildings and smart cities. Why? Well, because President Xi and President Obama made an agreement last November in Beijing to actually make sure that they reduce their carbon emissions by 20% each country by the year 2030. So there's these initiatives that are going on that are massive in nature, but also taking innovation and putting them into the front that we normally did not have a place at the table, especially when it came to things like policy. So we were part of a presidential trade mission that was in China. We were exposing the innovations that happen here in the U.S. to the Chinese market, and vice versa. They were showing us the industrial might that they do have in order to implement on a massive scale, so that we do start to take a look at individual buildings, campuses, and complete cities to see how we can start to reduce these types of issues, especially in the world of energy. So next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today are some very interesting technologies, not just what we do, but overall, as we start to emerge from the world of flat information, 2D, that type of thing, into the world of Internet 2.0. You can keep going on those slides. Next slide, please. And what it means is that we're moving quickly from a world of two-dimensional information, the world of, plans and specs in 2D into this world of BIM. There's a huge push over the past 4 or 5 years concerning the world of BIM for FM with staggered results, right? Looks really good during an IFMA World Workplace, session or during, a webinar, but when you try and do it in actuality, what we're finding is the analogy is that there's a lot of people that see a screw and they think that by, since they used a hammer to hammer the nail in, they can actually hammer the screw in. And you can, but are you actually using the right tool? And that's where we're starting to see that there's this evolution of newer technologies, things like gaming technologies, virtual worlds and whatnot, that are starting to leapfrog, where we are starting to get into the quicksand sometimes of what is available now, and we're trying to do something innovative, right? Well, we're starting to see that from outside of our industry. We're now into a world that says, well, there are many different technologies that are coming on board, and that when they are integrated into the fabric of the bricks and mortar of the physical world, very interesting things start to happen. So what you're seeing here is a traditional adoption curve of technology, where you have on the left-hand side, the technology triggers, that big idea, how cool it is, and then people start to get this inflated expectation of what this thing can actually do. And then the pragmatism comes in going, yeah, but how's it going to help me? And there seems to be like this trend that always happened at different velocities, of course, but the adoption cycle that goes into this trough of disillusionment, right? Well, it's not going to be the silver bullet that's going to answer everything, but guess what? Sometimes it actually starts to cross what's called the chasm, because most technologies die in the trough of disillusionment. They never get traction and they say, see, it didn't work. Then we actually have those technologies that make it into what's called the slope of enlightenment, where people are starting to see the practicality of it. Like take the Segway, for instance. There was something that had inflated expectations. It was going to replace the bicycle, but guess what? No. It's now used in a very practical manner, especially when you're starting to look at campuses and shopping malls and universities, places like that for security. Okay, good use. So these are the types of things that then get into that plateau of productivity. And every technology goes through this. The big red arrows we have on there are the ones that are really starting to make a difference in the world of facility management, in our opinion. And it's the ones that we're focused on in a big way. The idea of tablets now is alive and well. People have iPads and Samsung tablets and all sorts of things. Of course, the Surface is a big hit, especially in corporate America and the enterprise. And then, of course, virtual worlds, cloud computing, augmented reality. People are starting to use these things in a very meaningful way that actually have traction. Probably one of the bigger ones, of course, is the world of sensors, which we're going to talk about in a second. But then the up-and-comers, this idea of big data and Internet of Things. Just what is it? So we're going to talk a little bit about that over the next 45 minutes or so that we can start to identify where you are in the adoption cycle of these newer technologies, and how you can actually start to track any new technologies that you may read about or hear about, and start to understand that it has to go through this process. So next slide, please. Okay, so in the world of Internet 2.0, please one click. We have this world of things that are now communicating not just with human to human or instrument to human, but the instrument to instrument, where things are starting to talk with each other in a very meaningful way that actually provides some very interesting processes. The picture you're seeing here is actually the Apple Store at Grand Central Station in Manhattan, and this was one of the first stores that implemented what's called the iBeacon, which is a sensor technology that uses estimotes, which are sort of about 2-inch diameter transponder type of sensor devices that have a little stick-em on the back, and you can stick them up on the wall. What these things do is that they act as a repeater for functions, and you can actually program them so that they can actually point to things like, let's say, up on the internet. So it can actually point to a process, it can point to a website, it can point to something that then provides a different type of answer than you would normally get by just walking into a physical environment. So in case in point, in Apple stores, when you walk in, it recognizes your phone because you probably have location aware of, already on your device on. It then actually will then understand who you are, goes up to the internet, looks at the customer sheet, understands that you have an issue, and then will tell you, with a text message right back that, your Genius Bar appointment is ready, go see Chris over at seat 3. So this does away with a greeter. It does away with a clipboard or the iPad clipboard that is traditionally done now in Apple stores, and it just starts to smooth out a lot of the process issues of, stopping and standing in line and doing this thing and that thing. The way that we're also using these types of tools is in recognizing people so that you can do something. So in the case of restaurants, being able to have a restaurant app, a loyalty app, where the actual, when you come driving up to the restaurant, you'd be able to be identified, which then sends out the signal into the maitre d' that's waiting for you, so that he will greet you by name, understands where you like to sit, what wines you like, and whatnot, so that you have VIP service. Now, that's a really, really big deal in China right now because of the crackdown of corruption, where even the perception of you buying a dinner for someone is under scrutiny. So the restaurants have lost 80% of the business. That's a big hit. So they're starting to see that this type of tool now starts to drag people back in and creates that loyalty, because the number one thing in China is face. Have you saved face, and do you show face? And this is the type of tool now in a process using an iBeacon that's now starting to help those businesses. One mouse click, please. Other types of technologies that are fast emerging are things like robotics, things like drones, of course, is all over the news. And what we're seeing are some practicalities with these things that actually get into things like first responder issues. We're working right now with an organization in Texas, firefighting organization, that is taking a look at drones that can help them with high-rise issues if there's a fire, so that they actually have eyes in the sky. Being able to be really practical about how that can work as an automated tool that can actually then help the firefighters actually have better information than what they have through just assessment of getting into the situation is a big, big deal. So, these types of things are coming fast and furious. There's a lot of focus and innovation right now on, well, what can these drones do besides, like maybe security or surveillance? And how can they actually help in the actual functions of a building or of a campus day in and day out? So, we run some hackathons, and we've watched some remarkable, solutions pop up from those. One of them being during the construction process, maybe it's a capital improvement process. These people actually created a drone over a weekend. That's what a hackathon is. Over a weekend, you sort of sit down with a team and you create something. What they did was that they took a drone and actually put an iPhone just with some duct tape on it, just to get it up in the air. And what they did was, this allowed them to go up about 40 feet up in the air, so 4 stories, to actually take a look at an on-site, on-premises situation. So there was something to do with the welding on the superstructure as this building was going up. They were able to fly up the drone and actually take a look, and actually then have like a GoToMeeting type of application on there, so that you'd have the different stakeholders, the structural engineer, the architect, the owner's rep, and of course the contractor that's out in the field right there, actually had a live video conference. So over a weekend, they hacked it together, and it just worked. Now, of course, it needs modification and everything else, but these are the types of things we're seeing in Internet 2.0 that are moving beyond the same old of, website, out to a laptop or maybe onto your smartphone. That's okay, but it gets really interesting when things start to talk to each other. Next mouse click, please. So much so that we're actually taking a look now at nanotechnology. So right now there's a pilot project going on where we have a flat surface of the bathroom at an airport, and that needs to be cleaned from time to time. The way that's done today is that there's a sheet that's inside the bathroom, and you probably see it every time that you're in an airport. And once an hour, the guy comes in, yes, I cleaned all the toilets and blah, 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 and he signs it. And that's a periodic basis, usually once an hour. What we're looking at now is actually using nanotechnology so that the banks of people that come in at certain airports today, where there are times where for hours there's not a lot of movement, but then for 1 or 2 hours there's a tremendous amount of movement. And guess what? You're still cleaning the bathroom always periodically, 1 hour at a time. It's not being most efficient, not most effective. So what this does to nanotechnology is that you can actually put this into the actual material itself, so that the surface by the sink will talk to the sink and say, sink, are you dirty? Yeah, I'm dirty. And suddenly talks to the toilet. The toilet says, yeah, I'm dirty too. And suddenly the alert goes out so that you can actually create it, go out and clean it. So these experiments are going fast and furious. It's sort of like a social network of things, which is pretty interesting. It'd be just very funny if the sink ever unfriended the toilet, but that's another story. Next right mouse click, please. Great. So one of the big things that has happened over the past couple of years is this movement towards data. In the residential space, probably the biggest news is when Google took over Nest. which actually were a bunch of ex-Apple employees that created this really cool way of creating beautiful-looking, equipment for everything from thermostats to, fire protection, all those different things that you need for the home. But now they're moving into a very, very different space where they're still using that technology and they're selling it out. It's good looking and whatnot. But really where Google is heading with this is into the commercial space. And not so much just with selling, cool looking pieces of equipment, but the back end. What are you doing with the data, especially when you start to capture it and then feed it into other expert systems? So definitely take a look at the Google Nest relationship, not just from the residential sector, but what we're hearing, what we're seeing is actually moved as being a router for a lot of data for your building. Next map, next click, please. Project Tango, a fantastic tool that allows you to take a phone. It's a specialized phone from Google. They bought the Motorola Mobility department, and they created this this tool that has a 360-degree gyroscope that's inside of the phone. Right now you have a gyroscope on most smartphones, most tablets, that when you move it from portrait to landscape, the actual reference of what you're seeing then moves with the phone. That's actually in 2 planes. Imagine it being done in 3 dimensions, and that's what Project Tango brings. What they've also done is that in addition to the 360-degree way of gathering information through this gyroscope, they've actually put LiDAR into it, which is a way of having light-emitting radar actually go out and actually take measures of what that space looks like. So what does that do for us? Well, for as-built drawings, what used to take maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour to take a typical office floor and actually do some as-builts, imagine taking your phone and getting 20 million points of measure a second by shaking your phone, and it automatically creates a model on your phone that you can then wrap up into a gaming engine and email out to anybody so that they can use it in your CAFM program, use it in AutoCAD, use it in Revit, or however you want to use the information. So this stuff is real. It's still under development from the standpoint that they have it out to developers and people that are experimenting with it. They expect this act to be hopefully out by this fall. As a product that you can go out to Home Depot and pick up. So great little tool that starts to emancipate ourselves from the human mistakes of having as-built drawings. Just one right mouse click again. And finally, the world of Minecraft. I think that anyone that has a kid under 15 years of age is probably used to Minecraft now. It's a very addictive type of tool that allows people to create fantasy environments. But what we're finding the tool to be is actually a democratization of design, especially when you can start to put certain parameters in place, such as business rules and whatnot. Now, although it's an 8-bit technology, meaning that it looks very cartoony, the actual underlying data and process behind it is actually quite sophisticated. So we're taking a close look at not just Minecraft, but the world of gaming in general as being that next great wave in Internet 2.0. Next slide, please. And next slide. We're going to now talk about a smart building. This is a remarkable project. It is a project that was originally designed to be just one building, which is now turned into a city. And in part, it's actually a vertical city. This is the Kingdom Tower in Saudi Arabia. It is 1 kilometer tall. Right now, it's about 38 floors up out of the ground. It's right on the west coast of Saudi Arabia in Jeddah. And it is just a remarkable project. It's one of these, things that we got very lucky to be involved with. But the cool part about this is that they are taking a look at this as a vertical city that for periods of time, days, weeks, months, certain people will never leave this building. It actually becomes a self-sufficient place for everything from schooling to living to going to work to playing, shopping, you name it. So the ambition of this I thought was great until we realized that, oh man, there's a city of 1 million people, horizontal city, that actually surrounds it. So next slide, please. So this challenged us, especially in the master plan, where we needed to take a look at this from the aspect of how do you make this a truly smart building from the aspect of 3 big areas. One, security, the one security, safety, and a better user experience. So we needed to incorporate also the building from being vertical to actually splashing out into this horizontal world as well. And how do you really make this smart? Is it a thing where you build the building and then put a bunch of Wi-Fi hotspots? Is it a thing that you build the building and then as an afterthought you start to integrate things like security measures? That's the way that we do it today. But what would happen if we actually took the basis of design is technology, and we build out from there that every building within this particular city would be driven by technology innovation. Probably a good example would be about 120 years ago or so, there was a brand new technology called an elevator that fundamentally changed the shape of cities. That's what we're doing here as well, where the master architects and developers of this particular city. Next slide, please. So much so that it changed the shape of a lot of our buildings and challenged us to think differently. One of those is the idea of autonomous vehicles, both for delivery with trucks and most specifically about cars, where there are no traditional vehicles allowed in the city. There are no buses, there's no trains, there's even no bicycles. This is a world where autonomous vehicles rule. They are actually managed by like an Uber type of system, which means that you have no traffic lights. The roads are narrower. There are no parking lots, which means that how you do get to like the inside of this mall, as you're seeing in this slide, well, the vehicles actually drop you off at that particular store. So it fundamentally changed how we were thinking about actually designing and then ultimately how do you manage this type of building, especially when it's kind of building meets technology. You can click one click. Great. So you can start to see, how the shape started to then adopt itself to the technology, which then brings into effect, well, how are you going to manage this over time? And, these are the things that we're being challenged with right now. So next mouse click, please. So autonomous vehicles, things like our partners in this are Google with the Google car. Will also then start to challenge us with, the idea of sustainability. And smart buildings really are what our tact on it is that the building itself is fine, but in context with other buildings and then other things, the things between buildings, become where the story happens, and that's where the good user experience starts to happen. And in this case, there's going to be a lot of walking. If you're not in the car, you're going to be walking around the city. So we have these designs where we have these beautiful structures that act as sunshades. You can see that they also have almost like a funnel type of system, which actually captures the rainwater that does happen in Jeddah, so that it actually creates a reservoir. And then the solar capabilities, it's actually called solar cloth, up along the edges of these particular sunshades actually drive a motor so that you actually get mist. So you're actually creating shade and mist with humidity to actually create a cooling experience. Just one click of the mouse. But at night, this is where the magic happens. So any heat gain that does come through, these actually fold up like lotus flowers at night so that you can actually release the heat from underneath and actually see 1001 Arabian Nights. Now, why is this so important? Well, what we're trying to do is create that seamless experience or a good user experience between buildings, because when you start to design smart buildings, I think the operative thing here is buildings. The idea of a singular building trying to do something, this is great. But what we're finding is that a great story is when you can tie those together and actually then have this continuous experience so that there's a brand, right? And you start to feel secure, you start to feel safe, and ultimately you're not even thinking that it's a sustainable design. You're not even thinking like that. It just is. Next slide, please. So another thing that we're doing here, and you can click 2 more clicks, I believe, on this. There we go. This is also the world's largest hydroponic farm. All the roofs are actually farmland where they will be self-producing their produce that will have not just enough, but probably extra produce to actually sell on the outside market throughout this entire city. That's something that we were told in the program was something that they wanted to explore, and we found the technology to be able to make that happen. So the idea of green roofs is real. I used to think it's silly when I used to see oh, it's a green building, people put grass up on a roof or something. But now we're starting to see some practical uses because the technologies now are maturing, the price is coming down, and the overall maintenance of something like this, especially hydroponically, is very, very interesting. It's not slopping around in mud. It's a different, again, technology, different way of producing much needed produce in that part of the world. Next slide, please. So this is part of our self-driving car prototypes. You can click through this, I think, 2 more times. Here we go. And you can see that, when we're using these types of vehicles, one big thing that this did away with, which is always a awkward rule that is happening in Saudi Arabia right now, which is no women drivers. Well, now there's no drivers. So a lot of the political stuff goes away. Again, it's a self-sustained system where the actual electricity comes up off the roadway. This is the world's first DC-powered only city. There is no AC current running in this city because every building is an individual power plant. Through a series of different types of clean tech technologies, the buildings are self-sustained, and actually then we have everything from solar to a unique conductor in the roadway itself that actually continuously feeds the electric car so that it never needs to actually be plugged in anywhere. It will always be charged. The idea for DC was interesting because we can now point to a measure that actually starts to help, as I open this up, the directives of like what President Xi and President Obama have challenged themselves with, which is to get to that 20% number. Because with DC power, without the step downs for transformers and those types of things, we're saving 12% every year of energy loss. So that means that the energy loss, energy usage actually starts to come down in a percentage that actually makes some sense. Next slide, please. This is also going to be a very big challenge for building out a sophisticated city like this, especially since a lot of it's high performance. Everything from the infrastructure, which is talked about with the energy, to the water, to wastewater, and then actually to the actual buildings themselves. And so what's interesting about this particular project is that everything's being done digitally. Meaning that all the designs are done in BIM, but actually then exported out through a technology called Collada that allows us then to manipulate the 3D geometry into very, very different states of being. Meaning that our model can also be a shop drawing because we can model it down to a very minute detail. So with our partnership with Arab, we've designed the majority of our buildings to be modular. Now, modular used to mean, 90-degree corners and looking like a rectangle, just so it could ship like, let's say, inside a shipping container, right? But with today's technologies, through digital fabrication and being able to take your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing, your structural, and actually then design it in such a way that the materials can be cut through CNC machines and those types of things inside a factory, we are going to be building Kingdom City in Beijing, China. We have 5 factories that will be taking our digital models and fabricating them inside the factory confines for extreme control. It also allows us to have a great quality control, quality assurance program so that there's 0 defects. We're expecting 0 change orders, 20% under budget, and 1/3 of the time. So it's never been done at this scale, but we are starting the process. And right now, we feel that this type of way of industrializing the construction process so that we get to talk with facility managers during the design process, because we're going to be leapfrogging a lot of steps where the facility manager needs to be consulted with so that when they're turning on the building, they're getting exactly what they have been expecting. Instead of the surprises that usually happen during the commissioning process. So it's a very ambitious way of going about this, but we are dealing with the world's largest building product manufacturer, Beijing New Buildings Materials Group. New York Stock Exchange listed, and they are just really pumped up for this type of work. Click, please. Next slide. Cool. Those are just showing some of the buildings that we are digitally fabricating into a modular type of construction. By the way, all the land development, all the superstructure, that type of thing, is being done in traditional stick construction methodology with our partner in Saudi Arabia. But all the fill-in is going to be all modular. And next slide, please. And next slide. Cool. So just some last things to wrap up the smart buildings, because I think that, again, smart buildings tends to morph into smart cities because there's lots of buildings, right? But what's cool about this is that there always needs to be, some control factors with all this, especially when it comes to the digital side of things. So if you can consider everything that you receive as facility managers from your consultants, be it engineers, architects, whatever, they're in some sort of format that's digital. It could be 2D CAD, it could be BIM, it could be something that you're getting digital. What we're looking at right now, though, is this new breakthrough where we have, a digital representation of exactly what's in place. things like Project Tango, things like being able to control the construction process through digital fabrication, allow us to get closer to as-builts than we ever have before, rather than kind of, sort of as-builts, right? Now we're into a world that says if we can increase that accuracy, then we could be actually controlling things in the digital world that affect the physical world. So remember, Internet 2.0, right? It's not just about iBeacons, it's not just about robotics, but we tie those things together in the digital world so that you can start then to create processes that are easier to manage, easier to control, and lower costs. And that's the idea of this, the cyber physical world, where the interaction is where it's a place of discovery right now, and a very exciting space to be in. So much so that we see a lot of the first initial ideas of a digital nervous system throughout the your buildings now and across cities, where building automation systems, building management systems, things like that are very good. Except that they're individual siloed, right? I mean, everyone's trying to get to their backnet and LonNet roles and whatever. But, truth be told, not everyone's playing around the same way. The standards are kind of sort of there, but not everyone's using them. So one of the ideas is to say, what would happen if we could take the data points out of the actual things that are created by authoring software today, so things like Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, CAD, whatever it is, and you can get down to the data point and pull that into an unstructured world like the internet. That's what's called big data. And if you have that big data that's flowing like a river, it's really not big data, it's infinite data. It will continue on forever and ever and ever and continue to grow. So what we need to do is sort of harness that and manage it, because then at that point, we can now start to emancipate ourselves from individual pieces of software and getting actually into solutions. And that's what this group, Universal Robotics, has created. They've created this really cool thing. I like to think of it as a brain. It's an artificial intelligence tool called Neocortex. What they've done, in essence, is allow you to capture data and allow that data to be analyzed in a way that can be focused in on a particular person or a particular piece of equipment, furniture, fixtures, or the building itself. In other words, it can actually create personality around the data. How does it do that? Well, think of it as like the built environment Siri, where you actually are able to talk to the building's able to talk back to you because it recognizes you, it recognizes facial recognition, it understands if you have a certain type of look, of course learned over time, that you're happy or sad. It can actually take a look at your calendar, your email, your text, and try and figure out, what's bugging you or how come you're happy, and then adjust itself on how it's going to respond with you empathetically. This stuff is often running off to the races. It's being used at FedEx, Amazon, and also this group in New Zealand called Hanson Robotics, where the way that they're using it is you see one of these robot puppets that looks like Albert Einstein in the slide. Hanson Robotics uses it for a technology that allows a person that has Alzheimer's or an autistic child to have a relationship with the robot, because the robot has empathy and can talk and learn from that other person and has infinite patience. So a lot, the stuff, again, learning from other industries, learning from other implementations, I think is going to be critical for the future as we start to take a look at the Internet 2.0 and all these new technologies that are popping forward. You can click onto the next slide. And next slide. And next slide, please. Now we get into smart cities, and this is where things get interesting. Remember, I just talked about this idea of the cyber physical systems. This is Atlanta, Georgia, where Mayor Reed used the model of Atlanta. Again, it's a gaming platform, so he can use his finger to move around. What I'm also going to do after this particular session is I'll send over to the folks over at IFMA the actual videos, or it links out to the YouTubes, so you can actually see these things in a demo live motion. Right now we have still images just through the limitations of GoToMeeting, so I apologize for that. But I'll definitely send over to Joshua and stuff the links over to YouTube, and you can take a look afterwards and really see the power of what happens when you have movement in 3D along with realistic data in the back end. The way that Mayor Reed is using this is that he used it initially to convince the City Council and the citizens of Atlanta that it was a good idea to move the Georgia Dome from its current location into a new location in Midtown, so that it would spur economic stimulus and start to provide in a rather dicey part of Midtown, a new life. How do you take an inner city and start to allow the built environment to help with, healing processes and growth and jobs, and so that we don't have the situations like we have in Baltimore. Not that the built environment is going to be the answer to it, but it's a good step in that direction, so that you do have, youth facilities and those types of things. Instead of them being burnt down, let's see them grow. So these are the types of things that that mayors are using this for. Mayor James in Kansas City, Mayor Lee in San Francisco are using similar type of metaphors to help tell their story. It's a great storytelling tool for politicians and leadership in government. But where, again, when we start to take a look at the cyber-physical nature of this, we start to run up against some very interesting scenarios. So not just for existing cities, but also greenfield cities like Kingdom City. Next slide, please. And again, I'll have this video up online also for you to take a look at. But this is in Malaysia. This is going to be Southeast Asia's first true smart city that actually takes the idea of smart buildings into a city. But more importantly, the outcomes of a cyber-physical system is actually having a smart life. This is a brand new city on the coast of Indonesia, on the west coast of Indonesia, right across from Indonesia, I'm sorry, the west coast of Malaysia, taking a look at Indonesia in a place called Malacca. It's halfway between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, and what this particular new city promises to do is to take that cyber-physical world and allow it to be manipulated in a way so that you're creating different layers of experiences. In Dubai, there was a lot of new developments that were put into place that were just meant for resorts. I mean, that's all it was meant to be. It's all it is. Some people call it a little shallow, sort of like going out and saying, well, that's all there is. And in certain cases, they're right. Like, where's the history? Where's the culture? What else does this thing do? But in the case of Malacca Gateway, they're actually taking an approach where it's not just about, a beautiful spot in Southeast Asia that has great sunshine and, great place for a vacation to get suntan. They're also looking at this as being a medical tourism spot for Southeast Asia, especially for the wealthy Chinese. So we are talking with groups like St. Jude's Children's Hospital, the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, people like that, to actually set this up now as one of their regional hubs. Another thing that they're doing is that they have this set up for containers, which is really interesting because you think shipping containers, how attractive is that? But this is a hub, again, in between two major areas, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, that actually would have a cheaper rate. Instead of shipping all the way around, you can actually drop it off here. And the way they do is actually through pneumatic tubes. So you actually have a port that is out into the Malacca Straits, and you actually put all the different, cargo containers and whatnot down into the ocean because they create like these canyons, and then it shoots it off into the mainland. It's just a fantastic engineering project that, blew me away when I first, was exposed to it. So, having industrial, light industrial, medical, and resort, along, of course, with the traditional things like shopping malls, commercial office space, residential, and that type of thing, is really an interesting mix, which then challenges an organization like Malacca Gateway that's a single development creating an entire city to, well, what is facility management in that end of the world? Is it about finding those experts that can actually take a high-performance building or high-performance process like the shipping container world and marrying it up into a traditional process of what we understand and how we can measure success for facility managers? So, I'm looking at this one as a real challenge because, it's not as large, like let's say as Kingdom City. This is meant to be a city of about 200,000 people or so, as opposed to the million over in Kingdom City. But, this is going to be where we need to have that dialogue way early on about, well, how do you manage this thing as a developer, pull it back in, start to see where the critical path processes are, and the data that's necessary to manage this, multiple disciplinary, environment. And again, do the three main things: a better user experience, safer place, and a more secure place. Next slide, please. Now we get into smart life. So, we have this wonderful project in Malaysia, have some things going on in Saudi Arabia, China, of course. We just opened up offices in Guangzhou, have a Guangzhou Knowledge City, which we won't get into this particular conference call, but we're seeing that there's this mix now of new cities and existing cities where when they start to implement things, again, in that cyber-physical world, important things start to pop out. Next slide, please. And again, trying to figure out how do you tie together, between buildings for that smart life experience, and then start to take the Internet of Things and start to place them in place so that you tie together a very complete story. Well, that's what we found with our product called Strawberry Tree. These are comprised of a wooden bench, which is recycled, a beautiful steel sculpture that kind of looks like an abstract tree, with a canopy, which is a solar panel. And what this does is provides free Wi-Fi. If you sit down and you charge up your devices, your cell phones or your iPads or whatever. It has environmental sensing. It also has transponders for first responders, and it's a great place for community gathering, so it becomes a great advertising tool. These are being manufactured right now in Europe with high success, but we're actually looking right now at this being as part of the staple of the U.S. National Park Service as of last week. Very, very cool technology that is a standalone piece that, again, starts to talk to in a microcosm what we're looking at on horizon line of where we're going to be as facility managers as we're starting to look outside the building, how to tie things together. Next slide, please. And next slide. So you can stop there. So one of the technologies that grew out of this mashup of data but by itself, the idea of digital cyber meeting the physical world, was actually working with the city of Kansas City, Missouri. What they had was they did have a terrible tragedy when we first met with them, where some firefighters had passed during a firefighting event, and it was on everyone's mind. And we're talking about smart cities. We're talking about buildings and fire code and all this other stuff. And so we started to experiment with well, what would happen if we could actually start to enhance the experience because of the data we're capturing anyway through our facilities, through the AEC process, during the construction process. And wouldn't it be cool if we could mash that up together? And what we came up with was Orbi Fire, which allows for three big things. Number one, it allows you to get authenticated data in real time from the municipality, be it building department information for the particular home that may be on fire, because let's say a 911 call comes in, it's a single-family home, it's kitchen fire, smoke-filled condition, and there's a kid missing, right? So all those things are relayed out to the firefighters, and they're dispatched. And then they don't know really anything else than that, including the address, of course, until they get to the actual event itself. Then they have to make an assessment. And what we were told is if they could have information that they can pick and choose what's important, but at least provide them enough information so that they can actually get their heads around like what they're getting themselves into. Like maybe when that phone call comes in, the Orbi Fire system knows to go out and check all the MSDS sheets, the hazmat permits. So there may be a hazmat situation that they don't know about, which they would only know after getting there, right? So this prepares them ahead of time. And that's one big thing Orbi Fire does. The second thing it does is that because Google Fiber, the gig fiber network, is actually implemented all throughout Kansas City. They also have Google Fiber out to every home, which is great, but they actually created gig Wi-Fi hotspots with their streetlights. So now we have the ability to geofence that particular home that has the kitchen fire, which means that any person that happens to go inside the property, we now have a fencing mechanism put in place so that anyone that comes in or comes out, if we have the right type of device on them, they can check in and check out automatically. Because one of the big things the firefighters told us is that they're always worried about losing someone. They can't find them. Did they go into the fire? And then more importantly, when did they come back out? Right now, the best practice is a clipboard and a pencil with someone taking a look at their watch. So this does away with that. We actually have a near-frequency thread that is embedded into the thread that makes up the firefighter's name that's on his jacket. So he puts his jacket on, and then he goes into the fire, goes into the property, he's automatically geofenced, and he can come in and be automatically populated in, and then more importantly, checked out as he leaves the scene. So that's a big thing. But the third one, which you're seeing here, is actually a prototype of a thing called the iVisor, which actually takes building department information and different types of environmental readings within the actual fire event facility itself, and actually then projects it in an augmented reality so that you can actually see through smoke. Because right now, if you've ever been in a smoke-filled condition, it's terrifying because you lose sense of place. You can't find your way out. It becomes very disorienting. This allows you to actually see through the smoke, through an augmented reality, pinpoints you, and you can actually get to go save the girl that's missing inside that home. So that's Orbi Fire. It's, again, another lifestyle approach. There's law enforcement apps that are out there that are great. And, again, we're just seeing a plethora of smart cities technologies that are emerging from so many different resources that the facility management profession needs to take a look at what's happening on the city level and see if that could be worth implementing, not just in their building, but in the context of the bigger picture, such as if there's a fire, you definitely want the people to have your information. So next slide, please. Okay, now we're getting into the worlds which ties a lot of this together. This idea of big data, infinite data, which I mentioned before, really does have focus in the individual data points. Next slide, please. But big data is sort of like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. No one really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it. But it's a really big issue. I think facility managers have been dealing with big data forever, right? Because you have enterprise data if you're in that type of organization. You have, data coming from multiple sources. You got to piece things together. Sometimes if you run multiple buildings, maybe it was all the same architect, maybe it was different architect, different engineers. You have a ton of data that you have to sift through every day just to make what? Your technology work for you to do your job. So this is nothing new. It's just that it's being redefined in a very interesting way called big data. Just next slide, please. But one example I did want to highlight for you is this idea of, well, what happens when data comes out outside of your organization and is out in the, out in the public and is being used. And this is a group from London called We Are Data. If you go up to wearedata.watchdogs.com, you can actually see this particular demo. And what happens is they have 3 cities that they have started to scrape the public information off the public internet, which is legal. If you hit the next slide, please. When you go up onto the site, you can actually then, like in this case is London, you can actually click the district. In this case, we're going to click on Westminster, and then next slide, please. And what you see is this. All of a sudden, you're starting to see lots of different data points up there, and you're starting to see things like stats. So in the city of Westminster, the people make a little over 6,500 pounds a month. They use X amount of wattage of electricity. The unemployment rate is X. I can't read that right now. But then there's also activities that happen live. And those live activities can be Facebook posts, Instagram updates, Twitter feeds, those types of things. You're also taking a look at people or different types of municipal information, such as the shared bicycle program. If you click on the green piece, then all of a sudden there's, the number of spots still available. You can actually see the tube where the train is going through that particular, tube and then coming into that station in 59 seconds, 58 seconds, 56 seconds. All this data is available. What they do is they mash it up into this graphic environment. And the reason why they're doing this is to actually then sell it out to gaming manufacturers so that you may have a realistic view of what London looks like right now and actually make that part of an online game. So they sell it like props, which is really interesting. But what is terrifying is this is real people data. Every tweet, every photograph, everything that's up there, you can point, click, and actually see it. So this is the idea of where, open data and that type of thing can get a little scary, especially from the privacy aspect and whatnot. But when we're taking a look at this, is actually an opportunity. The opportunity is, if we're seeing this and we're the good guys, the bad guys are also taking a look at this, so we better be aware. Now what do we do with it? It's not so much curtailing it because, the horses left the barn. It's how do you manage this? I think the best people in the world to start to tackle this are not the tech people, but the tech people along with people that know how to do security, especially when it comes to the physical side of things, so that the cyber part of the world learns, and that are facility managers and security experts. So next slide, please. So wrapping all this up, when we talk about, the idea of smart buildings, smart cities, and ultimately smart life, managed and being driven by data, a smart city success is only measured by how well, the dwellers' quality of life improves. And it's definitely our generation's greatest challenge. Next slide, please. So we would take a look at groups like Singapore. Next slide. And municipalities like Shanghai. Next slide, please. The existing cities have immense issues because they have data all over the place. We also have newer cities coming online. Next slide, please. That are going to be driven by many, many different types of issues, but we have the opportunity today to start to say, well, you know what, if we are taking a look at the infill of what the future of Dubai is going to look like in this photograph, or image, sorry. Next slide, please. or Paris. Next slide, please. Or Donald Trump's version of what New York should look like, especially Governor's Island. Next slide, please. And ultimately, maybe a future of Shanghai, where, you know, we're talking about autonomous vehicles on the ground. What happens when there's autonomous vehicles in the air? You know, are we, you know, does that sound like it's, you know, so far off in the future that we don't have to worry about it? No, we do now. You know, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, self-driving cars weren't even on people's radar. Now they are everyday fact, especially in places like California. And now, over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be the only modes of transportation in certain cities around the world. So, again, the horizon line look at what smart cities can be, both from the new city and from the existing city, is probably a great challenge that we as facility managers already have figured out many of those issues, because we've taken highly complex pieces of data, we have highly complex buildings, and we're managing them. But they're not asked a lot about, well, what happens if we could do it in scale? And I think we can. So again, you know, one of the things that we wanted to drive home, that, you know, the idea of smart cities needs the facility management to have a voice at the table. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And ultimately, we're all doing this because of something. This is why I do things. So with that, next slide. I wanted to make everyone aware that there is a very cool innovation program. It's an event that happens about every 6 to 8 weeks at different places around the U.S. It was originally started over at Facebook, called the AC Hackathon, that actually really should be called the Built Environment Hackathon, because we have facility managers, we have you know, corporate real estate people, we have you know, of course, architects, engineers, contractors, meeting people like the engineers from Google Glass or Oculus Rift, virtual reality people, or the 3D printing groups, and software programmers from all over the place, usually from Silicon Valley and whatnot. What they do is, for a weekend, we come together and we hack a process in the industry. This becomes a very cool way of taking a lot of the things we talked about today and actually creating not so much just the event, and it's not to promote the event. What it is about the process. We've watched different firms, different organizations actually take the hackathon idea and actually run their own hackathons internally, because it's a great solution-providing, problem-solving way of going about a very creative process using technology as a focal point. So with that, next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. I guess we get to the question and answer period here, and Joshua, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you. It was a great presentation. If anyone does have a question, please type them into the question or chat box, and I would be happy to feed them to Paul. We do have a question. One second. Let me get back to the beginning. It says, essentially, in natural systems, processes emerge. In natural systems, processes emerge from the organisms forming a community. This is part of creating a niche. Is something along the same lines emerging in smart buildings and cities? That is, does the community of facilities and places in between emerge on its own, using its own information and intelligence?
That's an awesome question. Thank you for whoever asked that. Okay, so in computing, there's a basic tenet, and it's called the universal language, or the universal machine, right? The universal machine idea actually came from a guy named Alan Turing that was made famous this past year through the Academy Award-winning movie called The Imitation Game, where he was the guy, the mathematician in the UK that figured out how to break the Enigma code of the Nazis in World War II. He was sworn to secrecy about that, and was very frustrated because his contemporaries at the time were people like Albert Einstein and Van Neumann and a whole bunch of people that just so happened to be all in Princeton at the Advanced Systems Labs. So after World War II, Turing actually took a trip to Princeton, stayed there for a number of months, and what came out of it was the ability for the Department of Defense to spend money in Princeton under Van Neumann's rule to actually create the universal machine on steroids. In other words, they created a machine that can actually make sure that the hydrogen bomb that was being developed did not blow up the entire world, right? And they had to model that. That's why they went and spent the money on this thing. And it was all based on two tenets. One is that numbers can be at rest, or numbers can be in action. The numbers at rest we know as memory. The numbers in action we know as software. And that has been how computers have evolved since that time, right? Except that Van Neumann and Turing also thought that that was just one path they had to go down to because of a project, the hydrogen bomb project, but they always felt that there were different avenues and paths that they wanted to explore. Unfortunately, they both died way too young to actually go through that process of exploration. So the next step that they were actually talking about and has been written about in a book called Turing's Cathedral is this idea of organisms, where data becomes more organic and can grow in a more natural state rather than being relied upon on, again, numbers at rest and numbers in action. Sometimes numbers don't have to do either. Sometimes they do something else. Or when they do something else, it doesn't have to be driven by what we traditionally know as bits and bytes. They actually become a living organism. And that becomes science fiction fodder and all that type of stuff, but it's real. This is why things like the neocortex become really, really, really important to learn from, because it's learning faster than we can, as faster than our human brain. It's what Elon Musk says, we shouldn't be going down the artificial intelligence path because we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. But the horse has left the barn, and the idea of being able to have buildings, these individual servers in a digital world, where you're no longer just worrying about directory trees and folders and files and documents. What would happen if those buildings in the digital world in 3D became a repository for all of the different pieces of information having to do with that building? Where there's a continuous stream of data, but it's all contained within that vessel. And imagine taking that particular digital object in 3D and connecting it to another building in 3D. Now all of a sudden you're internetworking buildings, the same way that you internetwork servers or the Internet of Buildings. The Internet of Buildings is being driven in a way that again, we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, but they are part of that that organism, that natural state, which will help drive planning, which will help drive the organic growth so that we're not creating cities that look like they're dropshipped from Mars, but they actually have soul, they actually have context, they actually have meaning so that people want to stay there, right? And people want to live there. So yeah, great question, and it has everything to do with the with the Turing-Van Neumann model being turned on its head and saying we need to start thinking more organically, and how organisms start to evolve over time. And let's hope that we don't have disease and other bad things, which we know is going to happen. But if we can anticipate it, we won't repeat the mistakes. So yeah, it is driving the built environment in a very meaningful way, and stay tuned.
Great. Another question is, smart cities offer significant benefits in how we distribute utilities, handle waste, and construction infrastructure. With these benefits, what is the delay in rolling out more smart city projects now?
Financing and too many people describing smart cities not in the correct way, which this person just did. Smart cities seems to be a place for large-scale existing organizations to put a wrapper around what they've always been selling us anyway, which is almost, okay, it's a good marketing ploy, right? Because if you're not a smart city, what are you? A dumb city, right? Which is kind of cheesy, but that's what these people are doing. I was in Taiwan in January for the big Smart Cities conference, and I was expecting to be blown away. And what I found were a bunch of young girls in short skirts selling Hello Kitty, keychains and calling themselves a smart city solution. It gets very, tiresome sometimes. I think that what's going to happen is this. Now that the politicians understand that smart cities are about those efficiency gains in both energy, water, overall, lowering the pollution, all those different things that really count that you can measure. We're starting to see that people now are taking the wrapper not just to technology, but to like sustainability solutions, algae eating, solutions that can take the refuse and create energy around it. Taking photovoltaics of grass and capturing the energy of growth and, the photosynthesis of grass and actually capturing that energy, which I thought was so weird. But when you see it on a large scale, it produces energy. You're like, wow, this is really cool stuff. And instead of it just being siloed into being one-offs, what Smart Cities does is it allows the story to be told better. That's why we haven't seen it up until now, where you can actually say, okay, I can take these 5 different innovations, instead of selling all 5 individually, what happens if we can actually integrate those, sell the story, and actually show those efficiency gains? So yeah, I think that we're right at the tipping point now. Again, being having the the Obama administration behind us, having the Chinese leadership. My meeting with Premier Lee was unbelievable. He was really astute on this stuff. He said, "This is going to be the future of how we survive, not because we want to, because we have to." So I think that could be a mantra for all of us to think about as we start moving forward. But great questions. I appreciate that.
Okay, and then the second part of that is, what challenges do the populations offer smart cities, i.e. challenges with security, et cetera?
Well, yeah. Well, if you can imagine, Kingdom City is we're creating the world's largest terrorist target. And how do you not make this an armed encampment? And that's where we're starting to take a look at some very interesting technologies having to do with surveillance. It has to do with preemptive information and data, so that the actual city itself becomes part of the solution. Here's a case in point. There's existing technologies right now like ShotStopper that was developed in Oakland that has a microphone, and you can set the microphones up like in high crime areas. So when it hears a gunshot, it triangulates and understands and can tell the law enforcement officials where that shot came from, right? Or at least the direction for where that came from. That's step one. So imagine now you're in a smart city. A shot goes out. ShotStopper says, boom, okay, you buildings over in this sector light up. Suddenly the CCTV cameras come on. The back end goes through facial recognitions. They identify the person because they quickly were able to see where the shot came from, and the building said, okay, well there's the guy. Then most importantly, before the law officials get there, he runs into one building. The building knows that's a bad guy. It automatically does a lockdown, lockout procedure. Boom, you've isolated the guy. That's real. That can happen today. But what we're saying is, well, let's really make it happen so it just becomes ubiquitous, so that we're starting to get into this world of trying to have the buildings help us because they're quicker and they can be faster and less expensive than us just deploying 1,000 police. So different ways of looking at things, and look forward to reporting back about all the discoveries that are happening in the world of facility management and smart cities in the future.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you for joining us. I just have a couple more things. So unfortunately, I have to wrap things up. We're slightly over time, and it's late on the East Coast right now. I do want to let everyone know about our upcoming webinar on the 14th, presented by John Martins and Stephen Doggins. An email will be sent out about that shortly. Please make sure you register for that. Also, the FMCC would like to make everyone aware of other councils that are out there and the resources they offer. And then again, we just want to thank everyone for joining us. Paul, I want to thank you for presenting, and good luck on the next leg of your flight.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.